He said it while scrolling through TikTok, his thumb flicking up like nothing had happened. "You're not my real mom. You're just the woman who raised me." The words didn't land like a shout. They landed like a cold breath to the back of the neck, quiet, sharp, deliberate. I was pouring coffee just like I always did on Saturdays. The scent filled the kitchen. I'd even made breakfast, set the table. Two of Reed's friends were at the counter, laughing, half listening, but not surprised. One of them let out a low whistle and nudged Reed like he'd just won a round of some unspoken game. Dale didn't say a word. He looked up from his phone, half heard the comment, and gave that useless little smirk of his, the one he always used when he didn't want to make a scene. "Kids," he muttered, shaking his head like Reed had tripped over a rug instead of slicing through my chest with the sentence. I set the coffee pot down slowly. My hand didn't shake, my heart didn't race. But something behind my ribs pulled tight like a string, finally too worn to hold. Reed didn't even look at me, just kept scrolling. I smiled, that tight, careful smile women use when they're trying not to bleed all over the floor. "Well," I said, wiping my hands on the towel, "thanks for the clarification." Nobody noticed the coffee had stopped dripping. Nobody noticed I didn't eat breakfast. They laughed, finished their plates, disappeared upstairs. But I noticed. I noticed that I paid for the groceries. I noticed that I was standing in a house I cleaned, in shoes I bought, beside a boy I'd fed, clothed, and loved since he was 6. And for the first time in years, I felt like a stranger in my own kitchen. So I sat down with my coffee, still hot, still full, and didn't sip it. I just stared at the steam until it faded and the silence took its place. The first time I met Reed, he wouldn't let go of Dale's pant leg. He was 6, pale from a week-long flu, with hands too small to hold that much fear. His mother had dropped him off with a garbage bag full of clothes and no goodbye. "He just needs a couple nights," Dale had said. "She's sorting things out." She never came back. So I sorted things out. I made his favorite dinner, chicken tenders and corn cut into thirds because he didn't like the ends. I stayed up 3 nights in a row because he kept waking from nightmares. I sat on the bathroom floor while he threw up, whispering, "You're safe now." I didn't mean to become his mother. It just happened, like breathing does when no one else is doing it for you. Dale picked up extra shifts, always making up for something, though he never said what. It was me who took Reed to soccer. Me who learned the difference between cleats and turf shoes. Me who sat in school meetings, signed permission slips, paid for braces. When he got pneumonia at 12, I didn't leave the hospital for 2 nights. I fed him ice chips with a spoon and braided his hair back when he was too weak to lift his arms. People asked if I was going to adopt him. I was ready to. We had the paperwork, a court date, and then his mother reappeared, loud, tanned, full of apologies and ultimatums. "He already has a mother," she said. "Out of principle, I won't allow this." Reed was 13 then, old enough to understand, but still young enough to be tugged by blood. He stopped calling me Mom around that time, said it felt weird. I told myself it was just a phase, that love would win out. But love, I've learned, can be paper thin in the face of biology. And now here we are. Him, a senior in high school. Me, sitting in the kitchen where I've cooked 1,000 meals, realizing that none of them bought me a place in his memory worth protecting. I stopped leaving my keys on the hook by the door when Reed started taking the car without asking. He always brought it back eventually, but it came with mud on the floor mats and fast food wrappers shoved under the seat. No apology, no explanation, just a careless, "I needed it." When I reminded him to ask next time, he didn't look up from his phone. Dale said it was fine. That became the pattern. Everything funneled through Dale, rules, requests, even dinner plans. If I asked Reed to take out the trash, he'd pretend not to hear. But if Dale asked, it got done. Maybe not with a smile, but at least with movement. The worst was walking into the living room one night and hearing him laugh into FaceTime. "No, I'm serious, Mom," he said. "You're my real mom. She's just, well, I don't know what she is. Housekeeper? Babysitter?" I didn't make a sound. I just stood there holding a laundry basket full of his clothes, listening to the woman who once screamed at me, "You deal with him. I've got my own life now," soaking up the praise like she'd earned it. When I told Dale, he sighed. "He's just being a teenager, testing limits." No, I wanted to say. He's not testing limits. He's erasing me. But Dale didn't want a confrontation. He never did. He went to work early, came home late, and left the in-between to me. I started noticing Jace wasn't visiting as much. My boy, my quiet, steady boy, had always dropped by on Sundays for coffee, laundry, a meal. Then it became every other Sunday, then not at all. When I finally asked, he said, "It's the tension, Mom. I just don't like being there. It doesn't feel like your house anymore." And he was right. Somewhere along the way, this house had turned into a place where my name was only used when someone needed something and ignored when I asked for anything back. So I stopped asking and started paying attention instead. There was a time I thought sacrifice meant something. I gave up grad school when Reed was 9, even after I'd been accepted. "It's not the right time," Dale had said. "The boy needs routine." So I stayed, postponed, then canceled altogether. A year later, I delayed surgery for a torn ligament in my shoulder because Reed had strep, and I couldn't bear the thought of him going through it without me. I told myself my pain could wait, his couldn't. The year after that, I sold my wedding ring, my first one from Jace's father, to pay for Reed's 8th grade trip to D.C. It wasn't worth much, but it covered the deposit and the jacket he wanted so badly. Dale never knew. Reed never thanked me. I told myself that wasn't the point. What mattered was that he had a chance at a life better than mine. And I truly believed that love, consistency, and showing up would be enough. But love doesn't register when people are too busy measuring biology. I stayed in a marriage that no longer made me feel seen because Reed needed stability. I stayed because I didn't want to split his world in half. I stayed because I thought it was noble. But noble starts to rot when it goes unnoticed. That night I was folding laundry outside Reed's room, his clothes again, when I heard him laughing through the crack in his door. "If she doesn't like it," he said, voice light, like the joke had been made 100 times, "she can leave. My mom said I can stay as long as I want." The friend on the other end laughed. So did Reed. I didn't cry. Not this time. I stood there holding a pair of his socks, and something in me clicked shut. He had made it clear. I was optional, disposable, replaceable. So I put the socks down on the stair rail, walked into the kitchen, poured myself coffee, and pulled a notepad from the drawer. I wasn't leaving. I was reclaiming. It was 2:03 a.m. when I finally sat down at the kitchen table. The house was still, no music thumping from Reed's room, no Dale's keys jingling as he came through the door. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the coffee I had made too strong on purpose. I opened the drawer beside the fridge and pulled out a yellow legal pad, the kind I used to write Reed's school schedules on when he was little. At the top, I wrote, "Things I pay for." Then I started listing. Mortgage, internet, utilities, Reed's phone, his gym membership, tuition account, my SUV, the one he drove more than I did. The pen moved faster than I expected. There were more things than I realized, more access than I ever intended to hand over without accountability. But love had blurred the lines, and now clarity was the only thing I could afford. Next morning, I started making calls. First, the phone provider. I removed his line. The woman on the line asked if I was sure. I said I was. Next, the gym. I told them he wouldn't need access anymore. They didn't ask questions. Then the university portal. I paused there. That one hurt, but only for a second. Tuition wasn't a promise. It was a gift, and gifts could be withdrawn when met with mockery. I called the cable company, scheduled the cancellation. I changed the Wi-Fi password, too. 5 calls turned to 6, then 7. I'd closed every door I used to hold open with both hands, not out of cruelty, but because love with no boundaries only teaches entitlement. I looked down at the notepad again. Next to mortgage, I circled it. That house was mine. That lock was mine. And tomorrow, that key, his key, would no longer work. Reed didn't notice right away. He rarely did. It wasn't until his phone went dead during lunch that he realized something had changed. By the time he got home from school, the gym had already declined his barcode. The garage opener blinked red instead of green. He rang the doorbell 3 times before pulling out the house key I knew wouldn't work anymore. Inside, I heard the soft metallic clunk of him trying to turn it. He knocked, then pounded, then called Dale. I waited until Dale picked up and told him I was inside. Alive, fine, calm. I let them in through the front. Reed didn't say a word at first, just stared at me like I'd grown 2 heads. Then his voice cracked with practiced outrage. "What did you do to my phone?" I handed him a folded note I'd left on the counter. "You said I'm not your real parent," I said, "so I'll stop playing the part." He read it twice, then crumpled it like the paper was to blame. "This is insane," he said, turning to Dale. "Tell her she can't do this." "She can," I answered for him, and I just did. Dale's voice was low, but the anger was there. "Katrina, you're taking this too far. I'm taking back what never got respected." I turned and walked to the sink. "He doesn't want me as a parent, Dale. That works both ways." 10 minutes later, my phone rang. I saw the name flash across the screen, Reed's mother. I answered, waited 2 seconds, then let her scream. "You've always hated that he has a bond with me. You're emotionally cruel and spiteful." I pressed end without a word. Then I poured another cup of coffee, opened the kitchen window to let in the late autumn air, and grabbed the folder I'd prepared 2 days earlier. Inside were copies of the deed, the utility transfers, and the locksmith invoice. Because the next thing I was about to do didn't require approval. It required keys. I didn't wait for the shouting to stop before I spoke. "Call her," I said to Dale. "Tell her to come get him. Let his real mom do her part." Dale looked at me like I'd just broken a rule neither of us had written, but both had followed for years. "Katrina, don't do this. You're overreacting." Reed stood by the stairs, backpack slung over one shoulder, like he was going to school, not being asked to leave. But this wasn't a request. This was a response. I opened the hall closet and handed Dale a duffel bag, his. "Then you go live with her, too." His mouth opened, then closed. Nothing came out. Not a defense, not a protest, just that blank space where conviction should have lived. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't explain it 3 times the way I used to when I still hoped someone was listening. I pointed to the garage. Reed's boxes are labeled. I packed them myself. Clothes, electronics, toiletries. He can be out by tonight. "You really want to do this?" Dale asked. "No," I said. "I need to." Dale finally called her. I could hear the irritation in his voice. Not anger at me, just exhaustion. Guilt disguised as confusion. She answered reluctantly. She didn't offer a thank you, just a tight, "Fine, I'll make room." Reed didn't say anything when he walked past me carrying one of the boxes. I didn't move aside, didn't help. I just watched him, shoulders a little lower than usual, like maybe, finally, the weight of entitlement was starting to settle. The sun was setting by the time the last bag was gone. Dale stood in the entryway, hands in his pockets. "You sure this is what you want?" "No," I said quietly, "but it's what I've earned." And as the taillights disappeared down the street, I walked back inside, locked the door, and started cleaning the kitchen table for 2. Reed didn't look back when he left. Not once. He didn't say thank you. Not for the meals, the rides, the holidays, not for the roof over his head, not for the years. Just silence. And in a strange way, that made it easier. 2 days later, Jace came home. He walked in without knocking, holding a bag of groceries and a grin I hadn't seen in months. "Brought your favorites," he said, setting everything down. "It's peaceful now. You seem taller." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "I feel lighter." He stayed for dinner. No one raised their voice. No one rolled their eyes or huffed at being asked to help. We talked about work, books, the news, normal things, mundane things, beautiful things. After he left, I walked into the master bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. My bed. I pulled out a paint can from the closet, the same shade I'd picked out last spring but never touched. I painted over the wall Reed had punched 2 years ago in a fit of teenage rage. I hadn't fixed it then. I think part of me thought I didn't deserve to, that maybe a hole in the wall was the price of being not the real mom. But not anymore. The next day, I bought new dishes. Nothing expensive, just something I liked. A soft gray with a speckled rim. Clean, simple, mine. I threw out the chipped plates, the ones Reed insisted were fine but never washed properly. I set the table for one and sat down that night to eat. No arguing, No slammed doors, no waiting for someone to say what they didn't mean. Just me, in the quiet, with a meal I actually wanted and the peace to enjoy it. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to defend my presence in my own home. 3 weeks of silence. No shouting, no footsteps overhead, no arguments over who left the garage door open. Just quiet mornings with coffee, books that stayed where I left them, and dinners that didn't turn cold waiting for someone who never said thank you. Then the phone rang. It was late, just after 10. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said to answer. "Hi," Reed said. Not, "Hey," not, "It's me," just "Hi." His voice was smaller than I remembered, tired, rough around the edges in a way that had nothing to do with puberty. "I'm at my mom's," he said after a pause. "Well, technically on the couch. Her husband he doesn't really want me there." I didn't say anything. I just let the silence stretch, let him sit in it the way I'd sat in mine for years. "She doesn't really do rules," he went on, "or meals, or anything, really." Another pause. I didn't know it would be like this. I closed my eyes. That part at least was true. He cleared his throat. "I was wondering, can I come back?" I took a breath, held it, then let it out slowly. "Only," I said, "if you walk in with the respect I deserved years ago." There was a long pause, then, softer than I'd ever heard him. "Okay." It wasn't defiant. It wasn't muttered or laced with attitude. It was surrender. Not the kind that weakens, but the kind that clears space for something new. "I'll talk to your father," I said, "but the decision is mine." "I know." I hung up, not angry, not relieved, just still. Then I stood, walked to the linen closet, and pulled out the spare sheets. Because if he came back, he wasn't walking into the same house. He was walking into mine. He didn't bring much back. Just a duffel bag, a backpack, and eyes that didn't scan the room like they used to, like everything inside belonged to him by default. I sat him down before he unpacked a single thing. "This isn't a clean slate," I said. "This is a contract, a choice." He didn't argue, just nodded. "You don't have to call me Mom," I continued. "That title means something I'm not interested in forcing, but you will respect my house, my rules, and my role in this family." He looked up at me. I understand. And this time I believed him. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't burst into tears or beg, but something in his shoulders had shifted. Less square, less sharp. Just a boy finally realizing he'd mistaken love for convenience. The first night, he ate quietly, cleared his plate without being asked, said "thanks for dinner" as he stood. I didn't reply, not because I was punishing him, but because the words still felt too raw, too new. The next week, I came home to find the groceries already unloaded. He'd taken the list from the fridge and walked to the store himself, left the receipt on the counter. Nothing said, just done. Another evening, he asked if I thought he should apply to the local community college instead of deferring. And when I offered a few thoughts, he didn't cut me off. He listened, really listened. I didn't melt. I didn't run to hug him. I didn't tell him how much those small gestures meant. But I did stop flinching when I heard his footsteps upstairs. Forgiveness isn't a lightning bolt. It's a choice you make every day you decide not to keep score. And love, real love, the kind that doesn't beg to be recognized, starts with choosing yourself. I still don't know if he'll ever call me Mom again. But every time he sets the table without being asked, or looks me in the eye when he speaks, I see it. Not the word, but the respect. Author's reflection. Optional contextual notes for clarity. In the months that followed, Katrina didn't rebuild her family in the same shape it once was. She didn't try to. The house remained quieter, the rhythm of her days steadier. Dale came by less and less, until eventually his suitcase stayed packed. When he finally said, "Maybe some space will help," she only nodded. Because it already had. Katrina had discovered something she'd spent years giving away without condition, her peace. And though Reed's journey back toward her was slow, measured in small apologies and quiet gestures, it was genuine. He started leaving sticky notes on the counter, reminders to pick up coffee or run the dishwasher. Once he wrote, "I'll fill the tank tomorrow. Thanks for letting me stay." She kept that one tucked in her recipe book between the pages for Sunday pancakes and her mother's cinnamon rolls. It wasn't forgiveness she was chasing anymore. It was balance. Some nights, she still caught herself staring at the dent in the kitchen counter, the one Reed made slamming his backpack down years ago. She didn't fix it. She didn't want to. It was proof that she'd lived through something raw, something that had nearly broken her, but hadn't. And when Jace came by for dinner, as he often did, he'd bring dessert and tease. "Mom's rules still standing strong?" "Stronger than ever," Reed would answer with a small, rueful smile. And Katrina would pour the coffee, warm and steady, and realize she'd built something better than control or obligation. She'd built respect,